Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. Before we get started, could we play one video, please? Bangkok. Could we play video number one?
Sawadee I'm Kate, owner and chef at Bulang Noodles, Sukhumvit 36. After we've been through almost 2 years of the pandemic, lockdown over and over again, it's very obvious that lockdown is not the right solution for this case. Something we really need is just the right vaccine to protect our life, the right vaccine to bring back the confidence and trust enough to the people as a human being. And something more challenging than getting the vaccine is how and when we can get back to live our life as normal. We really need to have the good plan for that. Please think about it carefully. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. My name is Vincent Vijayvadakan. I'm a member of the FCCT's programming committee and a freelance writer for a number of international publications. Like everybody else in Bangkok, we are subject to the same restrictions, and unfortunately, I'm looking out onto an empty room with virtually nobody in it. And I'm very lucky to have two panelists here in the room with me, two others joining via Zoom. So we are doing this as a hybrid event. We will be able to take questions. Please, if you're watching on Facebook Live, feel free to post questions anytime during the presentations. We have somebody monitoring the feed, and we will try and get to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the 4 presentations. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We are closed to the public, but do support the club any way you can. Follow all of our social media, follow our events. We are trying to keep up a rhythm of at least an event a week with guests. The next event is about trauma and journalism. On the 13th, journalism and trauma, including mental health issues of the journalists covering the coup in Myanmar. So it'll be a good panel. I think we'll be touching on questions of mental health tonight as well. Certainly one of the issues that'll come up. And so on that note, I guess we should get started. I should say that, like, in the course of my work, I talk to a lot of people who are related to, who are from the restaurant and food and beverage industry, the hospitality industry. And I think this particular round, we've been, restaurants have been banned from serving customers on site for a little over a week now, and in Bangkok and in all of the dark red zone provinces where COVID numbers are on the rise. And unlike the previous restrictions and shutdowns, when I go around and talk to people, when I talk to people online, when I message people message me, I feel distress and fatigue and a lot of frustration from people. And this is why I've invited friends, chefs, professionals, some of whom you will recognize, to speak on video, since we can't all be in the same room together. So you heard Kun Kate from Bulang Noodles in Sukhumvit 36, who started her own business just a little over a year ago, and has been dealing with this crisis pretty much since she started. You'll be hearing from other people during the evening who have kindly shared their comments and their feelings with us. And on that note, I'd like to say as well, for those of you who have followed the program and for those of you who have been following the news lately, there should have been 5 panelists. And unfortunately, I'm sure that some of you are here to see Kun Tay from Chu, because a lot of people were very upset to see Chu, the cafe, the chocolate cafe in Asok close this year, last month, again due to COVID and uncooperative landlords and a lot of pressure put on the business. I won't speak on Doy's behalf, but unfortunately, he announced last week that he'd come down with COVID and tested positive and was checking into the hospital. And we wish him the very best, and he cannot be with us tonight. So we wish him a very speedy recovery. On that note, I will introduce the panelists who are here and who are going to share with us tonight. Probably the best way to do that would be to let each person say a few words about themselves. Kun Tay, would you start and tell us about what you do and tell us about what you've been doing in the last few months in particular? Just briefly. Would you care to introduce yourself just in a couple of words?
Sure, yes. I'm Darren Chai Ekma Paisan. I'm the assistant professor teaching at NIDA, okay? Now my current research is due about how the business, in particular restaurant, to survive COVID-19, and we study about resilience. This is my main topic for my research.
Great, thank you very much. Next on the screen, joining us from Khao Yai is Kun Tay. Could you say just a few words about yourself before we start?
Yes, sure. Kun Min, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Tay Panchana Watanasatian. I'm a founder of a very, very small restaurant in Khao Yai. It's called Pen Laos, from Laos though. And I'm a founder of Food for Fighters project that help for food supply to those who need, like doctors and nurse team and community people who lives in the community, and especially slum right now. So founded the project last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mickey, would you like to say a word about yourself?
Yes, hello there. My name is Mickey Doherty. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Panthera Group, which is quite a large company here in Thailand. We also have offices in other countries. Primarily, we are in restaurants, bars, nightclubs.
Could you move your mic a little bit closer to? Yeah.
So we are primarily in restaurants, nightclubs, bars. We own some hotels, different businesses, including a Chinese marketing company, a local marketing company. So we have quite a diverse business, but primarily our business is hospitality. And that's why we're here today, to talk about the problems we're facing now.
Great, thank you very much. And David, would you like to say a few words about yourself, or would you like me to do it?
Oh, I don't know. We could do a mixture, I think. David Thompson is my name. I've had a few restaurants here and there, and I'm a doughy, smelly, old, and discontented cook.
Yeah, you might also recognize David Thompson as one of the world's greatest authorities on Thai food, who's done us the honor of joining us today. So, Ajahn, would you like to start with your presentation, and then?
Sure. Let me share. How can I allow me to share my PowerPoint? Just 1 minute. Okay. Yes, sure. I got it. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let I start. Okay. Thank you for having me for tonight. Okay. I would like to share my research. Is about starving for supporting restaurant business, Thailand. restaurant business during time of COVID. Okay, let I discuss about the timeline. Okay, as you see that the first confirmed cases start from January 13, 2020, and then the March 22nd. This is the start for the pandemic and the hard hit that the government announced for curfew and lockdown. This is, as many researchers said, that the restaurant business has been a biggest crisis since a modern economy. And then in December 2020, we have the second wave, okay? And now we have the third wave. Our third wave start on April 2021. So you can see the timeline, okay? When you see the timeline, I would like to discuss about the business, okay? Here, based on the research, okay, our food service in Thailand, we have two types. One called full service, second called limited service. The data conduct from 2015 to 2020. As you can see that before COVID, okay, the increasing for full service. Okay, let me recall. Full service is a service that the restaurant allow customers to sit in and have, enjoy dinner, whereas limited service is only takeaway. And you can see that during the pandemic, 2019 and 2020, you see the blue bar, okay? The revenue of the full service has been declined 30%. There's a huge gap. Whereas the limited service declined only minus 14%, okay? So you can see the big picture between COVID, pandemic, and the service restaurant. Now, I want you to see, in particular for restaurant, if you are full service, there are two categories. One we call independent, second we call the chain food service. You can see from 2015 to 2020, the number, okay, of the majority of the business owner is independent. And you can see that during the COVID-19, it has been declined by 3.44, whereas the chain food service, they have been increasing. You see that? And you can see that the big picture that, the restaurant who will survive, who will not survive. Most, who cannot survive is about independent. Now, I would like to see more about the service employment. As we know, for past 21 years, Thailand, as part of service industry, the restaurant, okay, I'm sorry, in Thai, the language here, the restaurant and hotel is accounted, for the low paid. You know why? Because the people or staff working in the restaurant, they are, as I can say, with productivity, because they not depend on much on technology. There's a big gap, okay, for our country. So now, let me discuss the restaurant in Bangkok, okay? You see, Bangkok become the dark red, become maximum red, we call it the strict zone, okay? And beginning that, they have problem on the April, and restaurant can open to take out to 9 p.m. And this, in the third wave, is make the restriction make the income decline more than 50%, and hundreds of thousands of people have been infected. But on May 17, Bangkok can reopen and allowed to dine in, till 9 p.m., but only 25% capacity, whereas takeout only till 11 p.m. But you see this, the big gap between May 17 and June 27. On June 27, the Thai government banned all incoming dining in Bangkok. Okay, so you can see the timeline for the history for the restaurant industry in this country, in particular for Bangkok. And why I would like to share about my research part that I got the grant from National Research of Council of Thailand, that how the conduct data. First of all, a COVID-19 and restaurant business, they have two threats. First, we call physical threat. Physical threats coming from the hygiene, okay, social distancing. That's why the restaurant must provide safety and hygiene. The second threat is economic threat. Based on the research, economic threat is the thing that restaurant has to find the survival plan that we can discuss about detail for the research a bit. So, two threat is like duality as a hard hit for restaurant business. So, the one I coming with my research we call resilience. Okay, as we know, resilience is ability, a strong, to success again after something bad happens. And why we learn resilience? Resilience is part of our part of sufficiency economy philosophy, our late king. And he said that the component of sufficiency economy of philosophy is coming from moderation, reasonableness, and resilience. That's why I would like to know how the restaurant business can have resilience to survive during COVID-19. So based on the idea here, okay, I start to conduct my research in Bangkok, but it's still ongoing. But I would like to share the experience from research and based on the study, okay? You know, during COVID-19, the restaurant has, we call post-pandemic. The 4 things they have to learn. First, resilience. This thing that the restaurant, the owner must learn how to adapt. And this adapt coming from what? Uncertainty. As you can see that in Bangkok, okay, nothing, okay, becomes certain. You can see the regulation, the change, okay, from this today and tomorrow. And that's why the restaurant must try to find the opportunities to survive based on the resilience. And based on the research, many restaurant owners think about pessimistic. You know why? Because we don't know how long going to be. So that is the perception based on the research, okay? And you may ask, and how could, survive this? Of course, under regulation, under government regulation, is make the restaurant has to face with 4 things. First, operation costs. You see, now the restaurant only take out. They have to think about the cost, about the employee salary or the raw materials. The second is very important, is the maintenance of workplace. You know why? In restaurant, the key is the chef, the staff. How could you maintain the atmosphere during a takeout? How could you do that? Okay, that is the one thing we learned from government regulation. The third is credit. How could you try to, if you have a credit with for the loan, how can you do about credit? And the last thing is a bureaucracy. This is important, okay? How can you deal with that in this period of time? So the government regulation, based on the research and based on the study, that this is the 4 things that the restaurant must, confront with that. And what about consumer behavior? Based on the research and based on the interview, okay, in Bangkok, many restaurant owners, they said that, well, the customer always go to takeaway, okay, because now, they don't know what the future. The second choice can be frugal, because during COVID-19, we don't know the future yet. Many people struggling to get a job. People lose their job. They don't know what happened to be. They're frugal. They think before they spend. And the last, maybe more people become spendthrift. They be spend a lot because they feel like, wow, I have been, work from home for a while, that the way that they want to spend a lot as they can. There's a consumer behavior. And how the restaurant can survive. Well, based on the research, this is very important, the key to survive. There are 4 things. First, financial plan. When I interviewed the owner, many owners said that, well, we forget to have short run, we call short term and long term. During this, to survive in restaurant business, you must have a financial plan, very strong. The second we call flexibility. You must learn. Based on, the true story, Noma, the 2-meal star in Denmark, the business has been changed, become, simple food, okay, that's the flexibility. The third, you have to, we call guest satisfaction. You must make the guest satisfy what you provide, because who know that who a target for you. And the last is very important, the service and the safety. As I told you before, the threat is coming from physical threat. So that's why you have to provide the good safety and service. That's the key survival from the research. Another thing that I would like to share more is the strategy. During this time, many business, okay, lose, people cannot survive, but the strategy can restart. If your business this time not good, you restart again. The second thing about takeaway. Well, if you allow customer to, sit and have dinner with you, now you think about how you make your takeaway looks nice and make the taste look good, as if they were in your restaurant. And the third is a target public. You have to think, what is your target? What is your customer? And the fourth, this is very good, communication. Restaurant must communicate your restaurant with the outside that your restaurant is still alive. Okay, send a message through Facebook, so social media. Okay, to send what you have been. Okay, and the last still the same. It's called service hygiene. That this the key that during the COVID-19 the service have to be combined with the hygiene. That's the way that for the future. And now I almost finished. The lesson for the future. Well, you know what? This is interesting. This research combined the research from Portugal. The lesson from the future is you think about your management. Restaurant has two parts. One we call internal. That means how you control your staff, okay, your business. Now think about your management, okay, that you have to reform. The second about the fund, okay, the money. How you can use your money and how can you have the financial plan for the future. The third is the hygiene. This is very important, okay? Customer now, because of what we call the spread of the rumor, okay, the social media, okay, people believe, okay, from social media. That's why if your restaurant has something negative impact, perhaps, for example, if your staff get COVID-19, okay, and they spread the rumor a lot, okay, or customer get COVID-19 in your restaurant, what happened? And the last, for the lesson for the future, is social commitment. You know that restaurant is the business that combines people and people. You as a people to serve and customer the people. How you make your customer happy and your people, employees happy as well. That's what I discussed for my section.
Thank you very much. On that note, before we move on, could we play two videos, number 2 and number 3, which are from three chefs actually, sorry, who are talking about exactly some of the themes that Ajahn mentioned, including uncertainty and dealing with uncertainty right now, and the difficulties that businesses in general are facing and that their own businesses are dealing with. So the first video is from Top Russell and Michelle Goh, who are the executive chefs and managing partners of Mia, a restaurant that also opened just a few months before the pandemic started. And the second video, so young talented chefs running their restaurant. And the second video is from Garima Aurora, who won a Michelin star for her first restaurant, Ga, who recently opened a more casual dining venue in Tonglo called Here, and who was also voted Best Female Chef in Asia a couple of years ago. And of course, Ga is still going as well, on the same premises as Here. So number 2 and number 3, please.
Hi everyone, it's Top and Michelle from Mia Restaurant. We just wanted to come on today to say a few words about how we felt during the pandemic. I mean, it's been a little bit disappointing. We haven't worked since mid-April, and we were really looking forward to opening and seeing everyone come July, but I guess that's kind of gone out the window.
Yeah, with the latest lockdown, it's been really disappointing, whether it's factually led or just a gut feeling. We feel like the decision makers aren't really doing it just, and most importantly, we feel like the help that's needed, not for us personally, but to the wider industry, it's really not there at all, and it's just really a shame to see where the industry is heading in now. And I really do think that this might be the final blow for a lot of places, which is sad. And most of these we won't even heard of, because they'll be like small, independently owned restaurants, outside the city center, who are reliant on dining guests, and they can't do takeaways. And I think the worst thing was the timing. 1 day's notice with people who have made the decision clearly show they have absolutely no experience and have no idea how the restaurant industry works. I think the official notice came out at midnight and
Hi, my name is Garima Arora from Restaurant Ka and here in Bangkok. It's very difficult to remain unemotional talking about the situation that we find ourselves in today as restaurant and bar owners. These overnight restrictions that are sprung upon us effectively means that we end up paying for these policies from our own personal pockets. We have been footing the bill for the last 1 year where rent, utilities, salaries all need to be paid. And lately, even fresh produce and inventory literally goes into the bin because we don't have enough time to prepare ourselves. No business can function in this level of uncertainty and in this level of lack of planning. What we need is a say in this policy making where restaurants and bar owners can together lay out a plan keeping in mind public safety and public health, but a clear road to reopening our businesses like every other business is functioning right now. And without the sort of these lockdowns and these bans and these restrictions hanging over us.
So this time is a lockdown.
Great. Moving on, and of course, I see that a lot of questions are coming in, so we promise we will get to as many of them as we can. Mickey, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Vincent. Rather than speaking for the next 10 minutes about my opinions on the state of the industry and what we can do about it, I'm going to, yes, I will speak, but I'm also going to bring David in to help me along and share opinions and maybe counteract some of my thoughts. Just to start with, I don't need to spend a lot of time laying out the situation right now. Everybody knows how bad it is in Thailand. It was interesting that the Ajahn was talking about what we need to do with your business plan and with guest services and with hygiene, etc. But the fact is, none of this matters if we're not open. So the biggest challenge to the industry right now is that we are locked down. We are closed. Takeaway is break even at best for some small outlets. For bigger outlets, it just reduces the losses marginally. So the biggest problem right now is just staying alive, staying in the game long enough so that we can get open again within, hopefully, a few months. But again, there's so much uncertainty, we do not know when we will get open again. So what the Ajahn was talking about finances, I think the biggest problem, certainly the hotel sector, the airports, the hotels, a lot of big businesses can get institutional finance. The bar hotel industry, with a very few exceptions, is on its own. Banks will not back you. There's no opportunity for outside finance. So basically, you're looking to your savings, you're looking to your mum, you're looking to your friends, or in my case, you're looking to your business partners to come up with funding. And the longer the pandemic goes on and the longer we are locked down, the more difficult that's going to be. What do you think about that, David?
I don't think so much as just feel stark horror, really, as the virus has swirled around, eating at everybody's livelihood, wreaking its havoc, closing people down, and closing restaurants down and ending livelihoods through no fault of their own. The government itself has tried to provide some guidance, but like most governments throughout the world, they've blundered. And in some ways they can't entirely be blamed because who knew what COVID was? There must be some leeway given to an unprecedented event. But we're now a year and a half into it, and the current blunders that seem to be echoing throughout the world, not just here, although here is a salient example of incompetence, but across Australia and of course the horrific example of America in the Trump era. It's been an extraordinarily sobering, dislocating, jarring time as you see the behaviour of people. People, for example, not having the courtesy or calm or care to think of their fellow people and not wear masks. How masks can become political, I just don't know. It's obscene to think that politics gets in the way of the desperate need of people to overcome this plague, to be subsidised and perhaps have a chance to return to some degree of normality, because there will be so many people scarred, harmed and damaged. I started my career quite damaged, and I've maintained a nice level of damage throughout my career too. I've been quite even-handed about that, but I never expected to end my career in such doldrums, in such a sewer, really. It's been awful to see the slow whittling away of organised business and strategies, and the desperate attempts to save money, and the pivoting, and the spontaneity, and the desperate scramble to try and save every last penny or baht or sedang to stay open. I've been fortunate in many ways because I have a bit of a background, and I was reasonably established like you were, and so I had a little bit of a cushion to use it. I have. We have restaurants around the world, and the effect on most restaurants have been the same, devastating. You learn to do things that you would never have conceived to do in better days. So I guess there's a lesson of flexibility, but by God, I wish we weren't so flexible. It's harrowing. It's dislocating, in fact.
Mickey, would you like to, or do you have anything to say about how things happen in Thailand compared to other countries where you're present?
That.
Huh?
Yes.
I'd like to have a word.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you'll have something to say as well.
Yes, I mean, well, we all are aware that Thailand was the Teflon Thailand of old last year, that with 0 cases for many months, and everybody got complacent, including myself. I thought when we opened again in November last year, or in September or October last year even, that would be it. I thought it was the end of the pandemic. I lived in Hong Kong during SARS almost 20 years ago, and it was over in 6 months. I had 14 restaurants in Hong Kong at that time. I managed to keep them all open just about, using the same measures as I'm using here, putting staff on 2-day week or 3-day week, offering unpaid leave to staff, etc., all the same measures, but it only lasted for 6 months. But here it's been 18 months, and as of today, there's not much light at the end of the tunnel in the next few months.
There's not, because historically, pandemics such as this, the 1918 pandemic, which has been recorded and talked about quite often, but earlier ones too, the Justinian plague in the 5th century and so on, they seem to come in waves of 4 or 5. We've probably still got one more to come. They last for about 3 to 5 years. That's the horrific news. And if you studied history, you'd probably be aware of that. But few do, and in the horror and the shock of a virus coming, you don't refer to books that much. You refer to other things or drink at times. It's been difficult for restaurants because they've been subject to so many restrictions for so long. Somewhat unfairly, I feel, too, at times, because whilst at the beginning it was understandable to close some restaurants because you weren't sure of how COVID was spreading, and in a contained area where people sat and drank, it seemed to be a place where it could well sit and spread happily, boozily, and digest the customers and then head off. But it seems to me increasingly more difficult and more burdensome and more focused on restaurants alone. And this last outbreak, which brought the ill-considered suddenness of closing down restaurants with very little warning.
Could you say that a little bit closer to your mic?
The ill-considered declaration, or the untimely declaration of closing restaurants down with no warning, as somebody said up on the screen. many restaurateurs who were short of cash lost even further cash, and so they were demoralised. But even worse, I think, was the feeling that they were particularly singled out. Very few other industries and very few other businesses have suffered as many restrictions as restaurants. It was understandable at the beginning, but we're now beginning to see a pattern with how COVID spreads, and closing restaurants isn't necessarily the only way that you can begin to restrict it.
Can I add one person to the conversation? Thamkap, could we have video number 4?
But I think...
let me add that. This will play off well with what you're saying.
So this time is a lockdown 1 month of the restaurant in Bangkok again, and I think many restaurants are affected. We need some help from government to survive in this month, and I just heard that now we have some help about to pay the staff and pay the restaurant itself who hiring the staff, and both on the social security system and not. So I hope this will help. And my call on, to sell the food in front of the parliament is just to show that that restaurant industry is suffering.
I think I might join you. I think I might join you, Don, because I don't have a house anymore.
And we all don't have to go. And I really hope that we all survive this month, because it's very difficult for everyone.
So just to give you some context, that was Chef Don, who many of you will recognize from television, from his restaurant that has a Michelin star called Le Deux, from his newer restaurant called Nusara, and 2 other establishments, Ban and Merai, who called, when the restrictions on dine-in were announced last week, called for a cookout and food selling in front of Government House. So that's the event that he was referring to. So, David, you were about to say something about that.
I was going to join him because we'll soon be without a house, and I started off with a career that had some kudos, some cachet, and now I'm just pushing a cart around, and I'll probably end up in front of the Government House, homeless at some stage, because restaurateurs, particularly smaller ones, build up a relationship with their customers, but also with their staff too, and they've subsidised their staff. I know I have, and I know almost every restaurateur has, a small restaurateur, because the staff aren't just people who work for you. They become friends, they become family, and that intimacy obliges care. And when little subsidy and little aid was given to those workers, who were often quite poor, with little to fall back on, there was no other choice but to do that. I think almost every restaurateur worth their salt or fish sauce cares for their staff and looks after their staff, and have done so. But it's reached the stage where restaurateurs are immiserated to such an extent that they have no more to offer. If Don is right, and the government does seem to be finally perhaps beginning to understand that subsidies are important, not just in social welfare, but also in helping restaurants to come out of this hole and to have some ability to redeploy their skills, their assets, and reinvest in what is merely a shell of an industry now. The government needs to actually act in a concerted way, and perhaps in a more intelligent way than it has done so far when dealing with COVID. They need to be clever enough to be able to understand what the industry needs, many industries need, and what the country needs. And that is actually looking after the people. It's their first obligation, their first duty of any government, and they should Donald Trump, to look after your population. And yes, you were quite right when you said that rather blithely. We all believed we were in some type of fantasy world where we weren't affected by COVID, where the Siamese good fortune yet again rang true, and all diseases and illnesses and ailments stopped at the border. Oh, lovely Bangkok. But we weren't so lucky. What that did do is lull us into an apathy and a complacency which now is going to affect us very deeply indeed as this awful variant, more obscene than the earlier ones, starts to roar through the country, and without sufficient vaccines, without the right vaccines, without subsidies and without any plan, we're in for a tough time. And so that fourth round and fifth round is going to be very difficult indeed. I believe that there's something like 40% of restaurateurs are culled at the moment. Oh, that's just an entree. Wait for the main course. And Thailand, which relies upon this industry, will be the lesser for it. Not only not so well fed, but not so attractive as a place to be. And that's a great shame.
Can I add somebody else to the conversation who might express some of those ideas in even more colourful language than yours?
Who could that be?
Thamkap, could we have video number 5, please? Sorry, just before you start the video, we had some technical issues, so we lost the subtitle. But many of you will recognize Dylan Jones from Bolan, who is, Bolan was possibly the first fine dining restaurant in Bangkok that opened 11 years ago, and they closed their doors last month. In the face of a lot of...
I can give his spiel for him. I know exactly what he's going to say.
Well, yeah, you can, but let him speak for himself first. So we lost his caption, but this is Dylan from Bolan, who, with his wife, Bo, wife and co-chef, are very outspoken on a number of subjects, including the environment and including on what's happening to restaurants right now.
You can see the damage is wreaked on him. He can't even speak. He's in stark
go
horror.
ahead. Start the video.
Okay, I feel it's best that I read from a prepared statement. Otherwise I'll ad-lib and I might get too emotional. So here goes. First and foremost, let me say I'm fully supportive of any measures that are in the best interest of public health and safety. Saying that, however, this government, if you can call them that, is a disgrace. Their utter cowardice at making the right decisions is mind-boggling, like the decision to allow the mass movement of people during the Songkran holiday to go ahead. The callous nature in which their decisions affect the hospitality industry are heartbreaking. Increasing restrictions but never actually forcing any businesses to shut means these businesses are not eligible for support, nor are the staff entitled to any assistance. The supposedly righteous act of forbidding the sale of alcohol is nearsighted and destructive, affecting a business's ability to cover its costs when it is at a reduced capacity already. Furthermore, the government is depriving itself of millions in tax revenue that could be used for the benefit of the people, not for buying some overpriced, shitty fucking lamppost, submarine or new aeroplane. I personally believe if during the pandemic the government relaxed the labour laws like those regarding severance pay, and at the same time guaranteed assistance for the workforce, we wouldn't be seeing such a desolate future in our industry. Without that, more businesses will fail and the workforce will look elsewhere, saying, fuck this, I'm not working for peanuts with no job security. Prayut and his cronies continually display how out of touch they are with the reality of what's happening and are not only concerned now, but also for the future. They've continually tried to shift the blame back onto their own citizens. It's pathetic and weak. As a business owner, as a taxpayer, Bo and I feel completely abandoned by this administration, and I would guess that we are not alone.
Right. I would like to add just one other thing. I mean, Bolan may have closed, but the other brands, including which was a more casual drinking food establishment, Wasteland, which was a cocktail bar that obviously can't sell any alcohol, and the businesses' grocers are all on standby to come back, hopefully sometime soon. And so look for Dylan and Bo around town and around Thailand and elsewhere in the coming months. But thank him.
Do you think there'll be guests to the government?
Do you think that they'll be?
Yes. I mean, Don will stay outside serving, and of course, I'm sure Bo and Dylan will be welcomed by the government with open arms. Don't you think?
With equal enthusiasm on both sides.
Well, indeed, mutual enthusiasm, a good thing to have.
Mutual respect and enthusiasm.
That's called the social contract, which is not indeed in action all the time in this country.
Gentlemen, would you like to add anything to what you were saying, or should we go on to a... You will have plenty of opportunity to add things later.
I'd just like to add one thing to what David said. It's really easy to criticise the government, but all the governments in the world are soft targets right now. If you look at Donald Trump, for example, David, Boris Johnson, they all made a complete mess of this at the beginning.
Oh yes, of course.
David, Mike.
Well, you can say that they're knee-jerking, but nobody knew what was coming. So they were reacting as quickly as they could. Many mistakes were made, but okay, we've had 18 months.
Yes.
Look at the models now in comparison, let's say for Australia, which is going back into lockdown. Thailand is toying with lockdowns and doesn't really know whether it's opening restaurants next month, maybe not. But look at the UK right now. They've finally put their foot down. I think Singapore is going to follow a similar strategy where they're just saying, we've vaccinated enough people, let's get on with it. We will have to deal with this disease. Let's just get on with it. So I think that's the end game. We need to get open. We need to open the restaurants, control the environment, have social distancing. People love to wear masks here. We will be better than most other countries. But the only way the restaurant business will survive,
if it does,
any semblance of its past, will be to get open sooner rather than later.
I think you're quite right. Vaccination is the key. It's the only way that's known to be able to extricate ourselves from this purgation. You look at a classic example. I think that's run the gamut of competence to incompetence is America, is the United States, and the woeful approach of Donald Trump and the tragedy and the devastation that was caused by his blind ignorance. At least his veins were clean, his hands aren't. But then look under Biden, the dramatic effect of political will in changing, transforming that country that had 500,000 people, 450,000 people dead. It was a shocking testament to now opening up, because with planning, with logic, with clever decisions and right vaccines, they've managed to overcome, and they're opening up. Now there still will be effects, but you can see the dramatic difference that has occurred. Britain's tried, but oh dear old Blighty, it does muddle through things at times. Australia was bloody complacent. It thought it was a lucky country, and it didn't, and its isolation and the lack of infection prevented it from needing to be vaccinated as urgently as this bloody disease warrants. It's insidious, it's persistent, it's pernicious, and the only way we can escape from it is by vaccinating. And each vaccination will become better, and at least we can then contend with it, or contend with the economic consequences of this awful event.
Can I add something about sort of an immediate need, and something that you've taken part in, that maybe Kun Panchana, Kun Te will be able to say something about, because about what she's been doing and how she got David involved as well, even. Please go ahead.
Hi, Tete again. Thank you very much, Vincent, and everyone. Especially, I love what Chef David said and described. The things is, we just like for Thai people. And I'm also a restaurant owner in Khao Yai. And I feel like, of course, the government has no plan. And the Thai people, now we feel like we don't have any hope. Because since last year, if we still on and off like this, we cannot say this is third wave or fourth wave. It's on and on and on. It's just like surfing in the tsunami, or we throw the salt in the ocean. But that's why if we are Thai, or if you are Thai, when you are meeting or you talking with your friends, the first issue you discuss about the government. But of course, we not blame them at all, because this is all the big unknown. So that's why now you see all the phenomenon that happened in Thailand since last year. After we learned from the COVID-19, since we learn more and more to serve, to change ourselves, to adapt. Whatever government issue the rules and regulation, we try to, like playing windsurf with it. Even we can't sleep and we feel like how we gonna run the business, how we gonna hold the staff together, how we gonna make our get more income. That's why Food for Fighters happened last year, because I sat down in Khao Yai, and I feel like I'm very happy. But at that time, I feel like I have no idea what's gonna happen next, and I feel vulnerable. But I saw lots of my friends whinging and complain and feel sad and feel unsure about the future. And then I started a project. It's called Food for Fighters, which is, of course, UNDP endorsed my project less than 24 hours during COVID pandemic, because I do fundraising 50 for the concept, 50 baht per 50 box, and ask the restaurant for credit terms for 7 days, because I have to do fundraising from the crowdfunding. At that time, I used Sin Watana crowdfunding, which is very new. At that time, last year, I made 30, I can order and help the restaurant, Food for Fighters restaurant group, about hundreds, and made 30,000 box. But this year, it's more and more. Even last month, I started the project Khao San Klong, 100,000 rice box with Chulalongkorn University alumni. You know how many rice box we can make or get donated, and work with all the chefs and Food for Fighters chain? 200,000. We throw 200,000, and I feel quite guilty at the same time that I increasing all the trash and rubbish, And I asked myself, what happened in my country? The country that everyone talking about, we are kitchen of the world. We are, a land of smile. We are the fertile land. We have in the, in the canal, we have fish. In the river, we have fish. In the rice field, we have rice. What happened? Why in the heart of the Bangkok and all the 6 provinces around Bangkok has no security, food security at all? That's why we keep throwing the rice box work directly with Krong Thai and many communities.
Can I add something, or could I ask you to add something? That you came up with a system that not only sends food to people who need food, but the donations. What can you say about the farmer? Something about the farmers and the restaurants who are involved, and where the donation money goes?
Yeah, of course. We actually, after first quarter last year, I continued the project Support Farmers, Support Fighter, during with the Tiger Project, which gets support funding from UNDP, and we bought the fresh vegetables and fruits from wildlife-friendly community from Hoi Kha Keng, and also buying directly from farmers around Pak Chong area. We work directly, so we thought that because the restaurant closed, all the orders and things will be shrink, and farmer cannot sell their product. So I use their products to cook the food and send it pinto to the field hospital, and also create the concept, share as you like or pay as you like. you know, every week I do the like a flea market or the and moving, you know, to help the workers in Bangkok, so they can pay or not, no problem. But this is the things that I feel like I can't stay, you know, happily in Khao Yai. Because I think this is, you know, I like to show that Thai people, we full of humanitarian spirit, but we never surrender. More, whatever that the government feel, you know, the government do, the government not support the small people. I like to show them our spirit. That's why I keep working with Food for Fighters and gain more volunteer. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it is an incredible model that the donations, instead of just buying food and distributing the food, that money goes to, has gone to support farmers and producers who have excess produce that they can't sell. That once so just a detail of the program as well, many restaurants volunteer to, David, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, to donate 50 or 100 boxes a day, or you know, at particular times, and those restaurants, if they choose to, can receive those food donations and transform them, turn them into meals, cook the rice and cook the ingredients they get to turn them into these food box donations. And if they want, they can use their own surplus inventory. And if the restaurants themselves are in need, they get a 50 baht fee for every box they produce. So to compensate them and to give the restaurants a little bit of cash flow. So it's this circular parallel economy.
Which is admirable, isn't it, when you think where the restaurant community is going through such hardship and yet still want to provide and assist and support and cater to those who are in a worse state. It shows, it's an example of the heart, the soulfulness and the consideration that most Thais have, where they take care of each other. And that's indeed one of the joys of living here. The government's response perhaps is not always as joyful. It would be good if they start to perform, or rather take into consideration people's needs and how hurt and harmed and damaged they are, and the support that they do need, because it's been bloody hard, it's been bloody harrowing, and everybody's been wreaked and devastated by it, and bruised and soiled. We need some help, all of us.
And not only are people willing to ask for help, but people, even in these difficult times, people are providing help in ways that they just didn't imagine. And as that reminds me, just because we decided this yesterday, a shameless plug for something that's coming in August. We are going to be inviting several grassroots aid groups on the 17th of August here in the club. Hopefully by that time we'll be able to have a few people in the club. But we will give these groups a platform to tell us more about the good work they're doing, an analyst to talk about how to approach these projects. We'll be talking about running these projects as maybe not profit-making, but money-making to support themselves, and how these projects can be sustainable. So please tune in for that, and information for that will be going up in a couple of weeks. But save the date, that's the 17th of August. Right. On that note, would anybody, could we, since we ended on, we're not anywhere near done yet. But since
put my mask on and not speak again. I've done enough.
Could we, on a bright note on what the industry is doing to help the people in the industry and to help others, just one other positive note. Could we just play video number 6? And this will be from Top and Michelle again, who we saw earlier.
guess what we're trying to say is, if you can, try your best to order deliveries, takeaways. I know it's difficult for everyone financially right now, but I guess it makes a really, really big difference to your small local favorite restaurants.
Yeah, do try to support everyone. It's I know that it's a luxury to be ordering out right now for a lot of people, but do what you can. We haven't cooked at home because we've been literally eating out, but in for almost every meal. So I think every little helps. It really is true right now. And we just wanted to say, guys, stick together. We'll get through this. Hopefully, we'll all come out the other side. Hopefully, the government will wake up soon and make some smart decisions. Hopefully with some more data-led decisions than just gut instinct, and hopefully some more help. That's it. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Great. So, some of the questions that are coming in right now, appreciate what the speakers have said, but many people are asking what else needs to happen. What at this point, being resilient, having a plan, are all very well and good. We've talked about the vaccine. We've talked about the things that are going right. The vaccine rollout maybe started later than it should have, but it's going faster than.
Yes, it is. I think vaccination is the first step out of the hole.
But what are the bigger
Well, I
issues?
think there also needs to be a consistent plan and a comprehensive one that is clearly explained so people start to get some certainty and can begin to plan for their future. When we opened after the second shutdown, or was it the third, or was it the fourth? I can't remember now.
You haven't reopened after the fourth?
What's the point? We'll close down again, equally suddenly. But I remember thinking to myself, as we welcome guests back in, it reminded me of the world and the good, simple things that bring pleasure. And we'd forgotten so much about that during these darker days, these bleak weeks and years. And so if there's some reassurance, if there's a plan, and if there's even some subsidy where the government over the next 3 or 4 years helps to improve and to aid and to assist and to help those devastated businesses, that would give some certainty.
Are things like the subsidies that were announced last week?
Oh, it's a pittance.
I think they've just been approved today.
Were they approved today? Did they finish at 8.5 billion?
Yes, and it results in 3,000 baht per employee for the employers going to the employers, and then 2,000 baht going to the employees, which doesn't seem a lot, but everything counts right now. At least it's a start on something. But I think, look, going back to what the Biden has done and what Boris Johnson is now doing, they've just said, okay, get the vaccinations in place and let's get open. With all, we can criticize the government again, but Kun Prayut has given us a roadmap. He said 120 days. Let's see if the government can see that through, because if they do, and if we can get another 20 million vaccinations in the next 2.5 months, which is about that time, then we will be well over half of the adult population vaccinated.
Happy days indeed,
and we can get open. There is a roadmap, and I'm optimistic slightly, but let's see if it comes through.
Okay, a slightly leading question: is there a roadmap or is there a destination?
No, it's a dead end. I think I don't share your same optimism at the moment. I'm still trepidatious about the Phuket sandbox. There's insufficient vaccinations. The vaccinations that they have are not really as good as they could be. The adjacent provinces to Phuket are under-vaccinated, and with few vaccines coming within the next month. If something untoward happens, there's very little that can stop it from spreading unnecessarily. I think it's premature to open now. Better to wait for a month until it's all set up and then with certainty commence. The whole period has been punctuated with premature openings and sudden shutdowns because we close down too late and we open up too early. We need to have, we've learnt these lessons, and of course governments make mistakes. Even now they make mistakes because they're human and you can't predict everything. But surely to God they could work out with no vaccines or insufficient vaccines of not the best quality, opening up could lead to danger. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully that wonderful aura of Siamese luck shines back once more. What I fear, I look across the oceans and I look at India, who went within 1 month from political rallies and rituals to a Holocaust. I pray it won't be like that here, and I hope it won't be, and this probably won't be, but nevertheless we're risking it, and this virus is intelligent, more intelligent than many of our politicians. It outsmarts most with its pernicious behaviour. And so the government should be aware of that. Surely...
Can I ask 2 questions from Facebook, which are related? One is, why aren't big business owners not demanding help? Why are they not demanding help? And what can the sector and what can F&B, what can the food and beverage industry do as a whole to demand more and faster vaccines for their sector? Any comments from anybody?
I think I've said enough.
Well, I'm a medium-sized company, and I've been giving out thousands of food boxes every month to my staff since over a year ago. Including this coming Friday, we're scheduled again. About 1,500 food boxes going to my staff and some of my tenants. I also own an entertainment plaza, and I'm actually feeding the tenants. I don't have to do that, but I'm trying to help the staff as much as possible. So I think everybody's chipping in, such as CC up here with our wonderful initiative, and the big companies have donated. For example, we bought some ventilators. My company, the Panthera Group, bought ventilators for hospitals, but there were hundreds already donated by big business. I think maybe credit is not being given enough.
No, I think whether it's very small scale or
it's the act itself,
and grassroots like Food for Fighters, I think all businesses have many, maybe not all, but many businesses have made
many businesses have actually shown their better side.
The question was actually, though, what can the industry and what can the businesses do to influence policy? Or can they? Can they?
Can one?
Is there a channel of communication that's open? I see Achanran on the screen nodding his head. I don't know if you'd like to say something about that, or if you.
Yeah. Okay. I listening to all of you. Okay. You have to think about Thailand first. Okay. Before COVID-19, Thai government put the campaign on gastronomic tourism. Okay. They put too much hope in tourism. Since COVID-19, country shut down. Okay. Many restaurants, some mostly fine dining, depend on foreign customer. That does a big impact to the business. So based on the research, the fine dining restaurant business become more vulnerable, have a hard hit, comparing with a simple restaurant. So that's why this is the key step that now you must rethink and manage and try to restart your business again. Because this is the first pandemic. As I want to explain, based on my experience, this is the first pandemic that the government never had that before. Okay? We didn't have that before in our lifetime. This is the first time. Okay? So that's why people complain, blame. But on the one hand, as I'm a teacher, so nothing you can change. It's external. One you can change, you have to find your own opportunity to resilient, to try to get what your target, how you communicate with the customer, and learn to survive. And to answer more, all around the world have been infected, similar to Thailand. But Thailand, because we put too much hope on tourism industry, that's why this might be the biggest mistake for our learning. It's a lesson. That's it.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to add anything about tourism and the interdependence of tourism and the restaurant business. It's an obvious link, but
the only restaurant out of a couple of dozen outlets I have in Thailand, more than that, but the only one I have open right now is a restaurant that does not get any tourists. It relies almost entirely on local Thai people and some expats. And that's a sustainable business. And I'm lucky to have that one restaurant. I've got many other restaurants that I can open if I'm allowed to open for takeaway and delivery, but it's just not feasible. So whether we like it or not, I've got restaurants in Samui, Pattaya, a lot in Phuket, nightclubs. They all rely on tourism. And that's something that's not going to change. I can open more restaurants that target the local market, and there's a lot of great restaurants here that only get the local market. But the fact is the tourism industry contributes 20% plus to the GDP. Of course, then huge millions of people are employed in this industry. So if we stay flippant about the tourism industry and don't manage it properly and don't manage the unleashing and unlocking of this country, then there will be catastrophe.
Do you think that tourism and restaurants in some ways might change and not be so commercial or so stark and just geared towards garish tourism? There might be a softening and a deepening of things because after going through such an event, through such a tragedy, your priorities alter, you become a little bit deeper, and perhaps we might become more mature, and rather than just go for the buck, we might go for quality.
Yes, I think it's inevitable, actually, David. We're already reconfiguring some of our outlets to target and to, well, appeal to would be a better word, not target, appeal to the local market and offer them something that they want. We have to do that if we're going to survive another event like this. We've had coups, we've had crashes, we've all gone through them. This is the worst ever in our lifetime, certainly in my lifetime, but if we're going to endure anything like this again, we need to be more adaptable and we need to be more diverse.
Indeed, and where that spirit of helpfulness and also forbearance at times too, and also immediate action and decisive action and intelligent actions that combine together to actually form a response that can deal with lesser problems. Although we will be facing one that will make this COVID event perhaps look like an afternoon tea party with the climate crisis occurring and water resources in jeopardy. And if you see some responses from some governments, and the swing towards the right, the erosion of trust in liberal democracies, combined with the reprehensible behaviour of some, in particular some Americans, with their selfish behaviour, I fear if we do not address our better angels, we'll all be seeing Donald Trump in the White House this coming August. And that's something to look forward to. I don't think I'd sell food there. I'll join Ton at in front of Government House selling food because I'm pivoting there and I have to change what I do. You're going up market, I go where I belong, to the gutter. And I'll do that with Don selling street food. But I shan't do that, I think, with Donald Trump, unless there's a poison apple that some whore's pissed on.
If Trump is a little bit beyond, our remit and the things that we can...
Oh, no. I think Donald Trump helped me get through this virus because he was mesmerizing.
I know, we've had this conversation before about how entertained you were by this.
Oh, no, I wasn't entertained, I was horrified.
You were absolutely,
I was rapt.
Exactly.
I loved it.
Back to the things that we can, maybe we can or cannot control here. What are, you're sort of rephrasing a question that we asked earlier. What can the industry do as a whole to influence what's happening right now? Or can it? Or maybe it can't. Maybe in the current climate it can't. I don't know.
There's so little resources. We're so depleted now, exhausted and almost spent, innovated from this onslaught. I just wonder whether there's much more that can be given quite now. I think we need to get through this bloody event with the help of the government, with a consistent caring for people, with some vaccines and with some certainty
But
of
if
policy.
if the feeling in the industry is that there hasn't been a lot of support forthcoming, and that 8.5 billion is really just a drop in the bucket, and what else, what would have to happen to change that, to make people sit up and...
I think like a holiday on some types of taxation, for instance, in order for the businesses to actually keep some of the money that they earn and redeploy it, so it brings back their businesses, because very few people have any cash left. I know I've been immiserated over the last 2 years because I paid for staff, and we paid out of our own pocket and not paid ourselves. And that's what you do, because, in this industry, I think you have to be distorted and scarred and demented to stay in it for so long, because it's not one where you make money, it's one where you provide pleasure and entertainment and joy. And so being so attached to such folly and behaviour, many restaurateurs spent what they had in order to survive, not knowing how long it would take, but also loving the industry and believing it is of worth and merit, that they invested their last penny in it. There needs to be some assistance, because they cannot support themselves for much longer. They're spent, they're empty. That's what's needed. I'll shut up. I think the government's super going to report.
There have been, I don't have the figures in front of me, but there are some very bleak forecasts.
Imagine what's going to happen with the psychological damage that's going to actually start
David.
to manifest. Imagine what's going to happen with the psychological damage that is going to start to manifest itself as people stop and think and reflect upon what has happened.
I think the psychological damage has already started.
Oh, there are some psychotics that are rather they ripen early, but a lot of the stuff there'll be a somberness for a while. It would be nice if we had the Roaring Twenties, as has been predicted by some, where we'll roar back into prosperity and have a carpe diem attitude, because we've looked at the jaws of death and we want to live. But if you don't have the wherewithal to live, it's rather hard to be jolly.
Ajahn, does your research say anything about mental and psychological resilience?
Yes, well, one thing that it's become one thing, okay? I would want to add to David, even we have vaccine, even we vaccinated almost maybe like 70%, people still have COVID fear. This is a very big problem. This is a challenging for our country. How you can make customer feel comfortable to go out, even they got vaccinated. But during this time, you can see that the media, okay, the news, okay, always come with the negative. So make people feel that they want to stay at home. They want to order they want to order delivery. That's a big problem. That's why the fear coming from the COVID-19. And that is all countries have a big challenges on this.
I remember reading, there was an article where they said the pandemic finishes, but then it takes another year or two for the people to recover psychologically, to have that looming doom lifted and the sun begins to shine. And it'll take a while.
Yes, that's why, yeah. It's not only the vaccine can be the final bullet for you, but how could you, what we call, eliminate the fear, okay? For all people, even for Thai, okay? They're very nervous. You can see that during for past week, the news make them become more nervous, too much.
But with good reason they are, because this is the first time this onslaught has actually had some devastation in this country. Mm-hmm. Other countries have been raked with pain and pestilence and death and horror. Look at America, 600,000 people. Imagine living through that. We had here the extraordinary good fortune of having 73 people dying before the April the 3rd outbreak was set loose. And so it's the shock of that sanctity of Siam's good fortune broken. And even though the numbers are still slight in comparison to other countries, it's because it's unprecedented, it's disillusioning, it's a shock, and people are just bewildered that it's finally come. And so there is that fear. I think once it comes to an end, most people are pretty resilient and they will bounce back, but they'll only bounce back when their coffers bounce back and they do have the wherewithal not to fear their future, not because of COVID, but that other plague that stalks us at times, poverty and uncertainty of financial future. And that's so necessary to have that comfort, that assurance that you're not going to fall down after escaping or weathering this, soldiering on through this, to then fall into poverty or to fall into something because you've survived it, but it cost you.
Other than the question of material wherewithal, which is clearly, as you said, everybody's resources are being depleted.
Do you know
what are the other? I mean, the news this week. The other news in Thailand this week was that Phuket opened and the first few hundred or few thousand tourists arrived. How important is that to mitigating the concern and the fear that we were talking about earlier?
If they get it right, and there's little outbreak, there's inevitably going to be some, there must be, but if it's contained, then it will be a hopeful suggestion of the future and the initiative of the government and the possibility of what can occur as you recollect what it was like. I'm slightly demented, I think, because when COVID first came in and there was that wonderful moment of hiatus where people just stayed at home, I read and I began to think, and I think somehow there was a sense of hopefulness that perhaps we could address some of the injustices of the world, the systemic problems that we face, and perhaps even contend with that looming spectre, environmental change, because people were beginning to think, or I think the term was recalibrate, to begin to address and consider what they could do, because simply they were facing the worst and they needed to find what validity and what meaning life had in harrowing times. And there was an opportunity to change the worst of rank capitalism and of the injustices that occur across the world, and to address climate change in the environment, which is going to be, could be horrible. We'll be the first generation to hand over to the next generation a world that's lesser, that's worse than what we inherited. And yet we're not addressing that. I thought there was the hope that we might begin to reconsider our priorities. Because when you reconsider your priorities and you're not just about business and making a buck and exploiting and fleecing the tourists, but in fact providing something of merit and where you consider other people, where that social contract is employed meaningfully, then, tragic though this outbreak has been, this episode has been, it could in fact lead us into a brighter world with a sustainable future where the environment will not come crashing down.
Which actually reminds me of something that I'd forgotten. There were quite a few people who wanted to say something and who wanted to contribute to this conversation. Some of them did through video. Some of them weren't allowed to by their employers, companies.
Really?
And that reminds me of one in particular. We've covered a lot. He wrote me a very nice note of a young F&B manager in a well-known brand of a chain of Thai hotels, who was told that he couldn't speak on the subject and couldn't even record a video for a minute. So he wrote me a note, and he said, and a lot of the things that we're talking about, the need for awareness, the need for change, the need for support. We've talked about compensation for salaries that at best were maybe 50% at some point. This talk of 2,000 baht certainly doesn't make up for a month's salary. And on top of that, in a service industry, one of the points that he made was like, what do you do to the people who what do the people who no longer are getting a service charge, getting their share of of a service charge in a restaurant or a hotel, that represented a huge chunk of their salary, and sometimes more than the base salary itself. What do they do? He brought up all of these very articulate points, and to David's point, he also said, what's happening to the environment right now, and what's happening, all of the things that are happening right now that are delivery, for example, and the plastic bags and the plastic boxes was just one example that he gave. Who's looking after the environment, and who's looking after the in this time of crisis, and how can you not consider these things? So thank you for reminding me that there was one other contribution. On that note, would anybody like to add any further comments? Can I ask each of you, what would you like to see happen in the next, since you were talking about 120 days, what would you like to see change, in the next 4 to 6 months, between now and the end of the year? What real, tangible changes in policy, in attitudes, in what could happen that would make things better? Realistically, and how do you get there? Not we would like handouts for all the salaries and rent relief, and somebody to compensate us for all our and for 40 million tourists to come back and start spending money. What are the realistic?
Vincent, I think realistically, the government policy hasn't changed a lot in the last 18 months, so why would it change in the next 6 months? So let's start there. Let's assume that all other things being equal, we will not see massive change from the government.
We might see a change in the government there.
So what we can hope for, going back to what Ajahn said about the fear of what we can do as restaurateurs, as employers, going back to what Ajahn said about the fear of actual taking a vaccine. My own PA didn't want to take a vaccine because she said it might kill her. So with that attitude, it's hard to move forward. So what we need to do as employers, for example, I've got over 150 staff still in Phuket. It's normally about 250. I have 150 there. They are all fully vaccinated, both injections. How that happened is because we registered them. So if you're an employer, register your staff. Do it for them. Don't hope that these young people or even old people or people who are living up country are going to go and actively get their vaccine. Do it for them. You can do that. If you've got HR or even yourself, small company, get it done. And let's get people vaccinated.
As long as with the permission and the acceptance of the staff.
Of course, they have to agree, but let's encourage them to do that and get rid of the ignorance and just teach them that it's the lesser of two evils. Okay, so that's the first.
How do you go about? I mean, this is an issue in lots of other countries as well, where vaccinations have started off really well and plateaued. How do you reach out? How do you inform people who are reluctant or?
There's very little genuine reluctance. It's more complacency here and not being quite aware of the benefits that can be derived. It's not as implacable and as irrational as, say, the American politicization of vaccines, where it becomes an issue of how you vote is how you take your vaccine or not. an absurd, irrational position to even consider. It's not even irrational, there's no thought there. But again, it is acquainting people and also doing it yourself, because simply they see that you've survived it and explain things. But most people are willing. If they're explained it, most people are willing. We had no hesitancy in our lot.
Well, look, that's one side of what I was about to say, or what I've started, and is get the vaccines rolling. Let's hope that the government comes through with their logistics and they can produce the necessary vaccines for the people that want them and need to take them. The second thing is then we just go back to the same stages. At the moment, in the dark red zones like Bangkok, we are locked down but for takeaway and delivery. So let's get the restaurants open again, maybe without alcohol for a month, with 25%, then 50%, then alcohol. Ultimately, the entertainment venues is the biggest fear, I think, amongst local people. And this is from anecdotal, from me talking to my own staff, I have over 1,000 employees in the nightlife industry, in nightclubs, and I need to get those people back to work. But of course, not at the expense of health or anything else. So step by step, we've got to do it. But we can't just wait until October and blast the doors open and hope for the best.
No, you're right. It's got to be in
we
stages.
have to do it in stages and monitor. But to paraphrase Kun Prayut again, he said 120 days, but he also added, we do have to take a risk. And I think that's very admirable of the Prime Minister to say that he's prepared to take a risk, and he knows, he also said, we have to live with this disease.
But it's got to be a calculated risk and an intelligent risk, and where you know the odds aren't stacked against you. Otherwise, it's not a risk. It's a certainty that the consequences could not be as wonderful as you might hope.
Yeah, a planned, calculated risk rather than throw
again,
the doors open.
We have to start somewhere, and the UK is doing it, the US is doing it. We need to catch up on vaccines and get the country open.
Yes, and once there's sufficient vaccines, then there'll be infections and unfortunately some illnesses, but it won't be as frightening, as terrifying, and as lethal as it has been. It is about vaccinations, it's about right vaccinations, and then it will reopen. But it's got to reopen when you're almost certain that you don't fall back into that hole. It's happened thrice now. I'm bored with sitting in the gutter. I belong there, but I'm bored with it. And
it's interesting to see. I mean, managing risk and managing additional cases and managing the consequences and the health consequences. There have been reported cases in Phuket, local, not imported. Since the sandbox opened 6 days ago, for the time being, these things are being well managed. If we can show that we have a system that
it's inevitable it will be, and it's inevitable once there's sufficient vaccinations. There will still be the spread of the virus, but its effect will not be so devastating.
The danger right now is that there aren't the resources, for example, in Bangkok.
Indeed. And that's why we need a drink.
So would our guests on the screen like to add anything before we wrap this up? Would you like to have any parting words?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, for me, I like to add on whatever you guys said, because I'm in Khao Yai, and I like to say to support Ajahn methodology that now Thai people, we learn to change and we learn to serve, because in Khao Yai, you feel, as a restaurant myself, I do run the restaurant, I feel that tourists or my customer more relaxed than who living in Bangkok in dangerous zone. So whenever, because Khao Yai is not far from Bangkok, whenever they feel want to relax and have a good ozone, they drive here. And then they feel like most relaxed without mask, and that's what makes us afraid anyway. So for me, whatever I can have some small hope or little hope from my government, I hope that our voice from small people would loud enough for them to hear, And I wish that another 100 days that they rule this country with knowledgeable. That's my hope. And I think 120 days or not, we see. And we learn how to survive. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to add?
Okay, I want to add something, okay? When we talk about vaccine, based on my research, the one company, okay, have the vaccines enough for the staff, but not all staff you get vaccinated, that's the same. However, what I want to see now, I want to see everyone practice, okay, hygiene, wash your hands, and try to put the mask, okay? And second of all, I really hope that please stop spread negative rumor. The more you spread some news, is the worse for the hospitality industry. Okay, when you talk about how many COVID infected, because we have to live with the COVID, we have to learn how to live with it. It's not going to be it's not going to be disappear in this society. We don't know yet. As I told you on the first page of my PowerPoint, we have to learn and the opportunity to learn live with the disease. They're not going to make you die if you got vaccinated, but how to live with that. That's what I hope for in the 100 days. Sorry.
Excellent. That reminds me of a couple of other shameless plugs I should make. Since we talked about both vaccines and alcohol sales, Panu, help me. The vaccine date is the date for the vaccine panel is. We have a panel on vaccinations on the 22nd of June. And we have a discussion about the attitudes toward alcohol and alcohol sales and the alcohol bans that have also been a very big part of the restrictions in the last few months, and that is on the 29th. And the 29th we chose because it's the day after the end of the current restrictions, so either restaurants will be allowed to reopen and trade in some form on the 28th, or they will continue not to be. So that's it'll be timely either way, and those are both events here at the FCCT, with or without a public in the club. We will go ahead and broadcast these on Facebook Live the way you're watching this now, and they will be recorded and shared on the FCCT YouTube channel. Right, on that note, unless you have anything else you'd like to share, I do have, just because this hasn't always been the cheeriest of subjects or the most optimistic and bright outlooks for the time to come. I do have one last video. We had some technical challenges with we had some download problems. We had some people who couldn't record their own videos, and then we had this. So I will leave you on a happy note. Thank you very much. Could you play the last video?
I guess that the only thing we can do right now is try our best to support locals. I'm sorry. Mango, you're in the shot! Sweetie. I mean, what I was trying to say is...
We're not going to use this clip, are we?
We are. No, truffle!
We have too many cheaters.
Thank you to both Top and Michelle for sharing the whole video with me. I did edit it out, but I didn't leave it on the cutting room floor. Thank you all very much for your support. Thank you for watching this, for sharing this evening with us, for sharing your ideas, for sharing your questions. Thank you to all the panelists for being here, and for sharing your time. We hope that we can see you again in person very soon. And thank you for those the two of you who made the effort to come in and were able to come in. Do follow the FCCT Facebook page.